Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Right Reason with Dr. Charles Rice, Professor Emeritus, Notre Dame Law School. How you doing, Doctor? Good to see you again, as usual.
Right.
As usual. We're going to talk today about probably the most controversial thing that has happened in the church in the last 50 years. And no, it's not the child sex abuse cases. It is the encyclical by Pope Paul VI, Humanae Vitae, released on July 25th, 1968. And everything, it's probably a safe thing to say that virtually everything that has happened in the church since 1968 has happened in juxtaposition to that encyclical.
That's fair. Yeah, it's fair to say that.
Let's talk about, first of all, you just go straight into the basics. Loads of Catholics, anybody who's not Catholic watching this probably doesn't know what Humanae Vitae is, and it's a safe bet that probably 90% of Catholics don't know what Humanae Vitae is, and yet it becomes the watershed moment for these three generations.
Oh yeah. And a lot of students in Catholic schools have never heard of it, think it's a skin disease or something. But, to put it in context, you have to realize that it was not until 1930 that any Christian denomination had ever said that contraception could ever be objectively right, a moral choice.
Right.
And that was the Anglican Lambeth Conference of 1930. The previous Anglican Lambeth Conference was very strong in opposing contraception. But the Anglican Church gave a very guarded endorsement of contraception.
And even then they said it was just for married couples.
Oh, yes.
And then just very limited circumstances within marriage.
Right.
But that was the camel's nose under the tent, right?
Exactly. When the American National Council of Churches agreed the following year, the Washington Post, believe it or not, wrote an editorial in 1931 in which they said that this is the end of marriage. That the idea that there could be a careful and restrained use of contraception, they said, is preposterous.
Yeah, and they were right.
Well, they were right. In 1931, Pope Pius XI issued his encyclical Casti Connubii of chaste marriage, in which he restated the traditional Christian position. And nothing much happened until the 60s because of the pill, and the pill came in the 60s. Although there was an important development during World War II, where the United States military adopted the condom and as a means of preventing births. And
they passed it out wholesale. Out wholesale to the U.S. troops.
That's correct. And the bishops generally were strong in opposing it. And believe it or not, America Magazine was very strong in opposing that.
Boy, times have changed.
Yes, but the question you got to ask is, what's wrong with contraception? And what Pope Paul VI did in 1968 was that he laid it out this way. He said that contraception is wrong because the unitive and procreative aspects of the conjugal act cannot be separated on man's decision.
Right.
All right. Now you got to put that in context with what was taught later by John Paul II and by Benedict and John Paul and Familiaris Consortio and various other things. And what you come down to is the fact that contraception is wrong because of that, because it separates the unitive and procreative aspects of sex, but also because it makes the man and the woman the arbiters of whether and when life will begin.
Right.
And
which is the point.
Oh yeah.
That's what it is.
Oh yeah.
You don't, you immediately go into this being the person who decides when life begins.
That's correct. And it also
usurping something from God.
And it also prevents the self-donation, the total gift of self, which is supposed to characterize the conjugal act. There's also a fourth reason, that what it does is accept the idea that there is such a thing as a life not worth living.
Right.
That is, the life that might come into being, except for the fact that we're destroying that possibility, or doing our best to destroy it. So you have those reasons why it's wrong. Well, Paul VI, he came out with that encyclical, and he was criticized. They laughed at him on Notre Dame and all the other Catholic institutions, and he said some things that are very important. He said, if you accept contraception, the morality of contraception, what you're going to find is a lowering of morality. Three things. A lowering of morality. And it's pretty obvious that that's occurred. And you're also going to find women being regarded as sex objects. He said that if you accept contraception, man will no longer regard woman as his personal, as a personal companion and so on, but really as an object. And the third thing is that it would put into the hands of government a very dangerous power. And all three of those things have come.
Oh, yes, they have.
Come to
in
to
spades.
pass. Come
in
to
spades.
pass. I mean, that's and it's the contraception is the crucial issue, crucial defining moral issue of our time, and you've dealt with that so often.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think you can. There's just no getting away from the. There's no getting away at all from the idea that if you, if a man and a woman decide amongst themselves, between themselves, that they are going to be the determiners of when life begins. Once you put that kind of divine power into the hands of man, it becomes a corrupting influence.
Oh yeah. I mean,
it corrupts beyond. Because look, if you're willing to usurp that power from God, why wouldn't you usurp any other power from God? And in fact, you do wind up doing that.
Well, John Paul said exactly that in Familiaris Consortio, that is on the community of the family, where he said that the contracepting couple assume a power that belongs to God.
Right.
All right? And you can look at it this way. You say, well, look, what we're talking about is the act, the conjugal act, all right? We can talk a little bit later about NFP, natural family planning, not for Protestants. Right? I've never
heard that before.
You never heard that one before? Oh man, you've been sheltered.
Yeah, well, sheltered.
Yeah,
that's hysterical.
Yeah, but the question is often asked. Well, wait a minute. How can natural family planning be okay? The periodic abstinence, and we'll get into that later. But the reason why contraception is wrong is because it takes that conjugal act, which is really an icon of the Trinity, of the mutual self-gift and self-donation. And God has given us the power to. He's chosen to make himself dependent on us in creating new citizens for the kingdom of heaven. That's amazing, all right? And we have this awesome power, see? And Benedict, when he was made Pope, I think it was at his initial homily as Pope, he said, each of us is a product of a thought of God. And when you get into the contraception thing, we tend to regard it as some kind of a biology deal. No, it isn't. It's much more than that, because the the only creating that God has done since the original creation is the creation of each individual human soul. And the reason for that is that if you put a male and female dog together, the material forces will operate, and you get a litter of puppies. But a human soul is spiritual. How do you know? Because you can abstract, you can reflect, and a spiritual thing
knows you can know you know.
That's right, and a spiritual being can't come out of that material interaction. So each and every human being is the result of a willed act of creation by God. And this is not my theory, this is simply the way it is.
Sure.
And that's why Benedict said that each of us is the product of a thought of God. And
let's go back just historically for a little bit, because again, back to the encyclical itself and the context, the time in which it comes about. You know, you look at this. You know, the United States Food and Drug Administration (FDA) approves the pill in 1960. It catches on, you know, pretty quickly. And even at the time, among Catholic women, Catholic couples also, they were a little slow to ramp up to it, but eventually caught on. You know, what's going on in the 1960s? Probably the most, upheaval of society across the board. The Vietnam War is ramping up. Kennedy's been shot. Martin Luther King's been shot. Bobby Kennedy's been shot. Vatican II's happening. There's the whole peace movement, the sexual revolution, the hippie movement. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Now, I've only seen newsreels of all of that.
Right.
Even though I was born in 1961, I have no memory of that nuttiness. But, you know, you see enough newsreels and read enough articles, and you kind of get an idea of what it was. Right in 1968, towards the end of that, all of a sudden, in this great anticipation, and I think this is important for people to realize, in this great anticipation that the Pope was going to say that the pill is okay. Now, that happened for a variety of reasons, different priests saying, well, we think it's going to happen and all that. That the whole world is going down the birth control road like, oh yeah, this is just the next natural thing. And all of a sudden, the Pope slams the brakes on and goes, no, this violates the will of God. It will destroy society. It will destroy culture, rip the family apart, change the basic understanding of who we are. And he got just leveled.
Oh, sure he did. Yeah.
He got, you know, a lot of people don't realize this. He was still Pope for 10 more years. He never wrote another encyclical after Humanae Vitae. He never wrote another encyclical. I imagine he was probably gun shy. Shouldn't have been, but nonetheless, he probably was. But never wrote another encyclical, and that became and it really became kind of the defining moment for not only his papacy, but the church at large.
Well,
it still is.
Yeah, and the reason is because of that factor that each individual human soul, each individual human person comes into existence because of a specific willed act of God, and because there's no time in eternity, that means that each human being has been willed by God from all eternity, right? And what the contracepting couples say to God is something like this. They say, look, for all we know, God, it may be your will that from this act of ours, a new human being will come into existence who will live forever. For all we know, that may be your will, and we won't let you do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know, that's why it's so basic. And when he did that, sure, it was in the middle of all this stuff going on. What we tend to forget is that in that same period, the Supreme Court of the United States reinterpreted the Constitution. I don't want to get into a lecture on law, but the First Amendment to the Constitution, the Establishment Clause, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, what that meant was clearly that while you had 5, or depending how you interpret it, maybe 6 established churches in the states at the time of the founding, what that meant was that a particular religion, Anglican or Congregational, would get exclusive support from the state. Mm-hmm. And what the founders intended was that you would not have that on the federal level.
Right.
So Congress could not make a law respecting an establishment of religion. Mm-hmm. Notice the language.
Yes.
Respecting an establishment of religion. That is, interfering with the state establishments or creating a federal establishment.
Right.
Of a sect, a preferred sect. And that was the idea behind the First Amendment. It never was intended to preclude state or federal governments from affirming God.
Right.
All right? How do you know? Well, in September 22nd to 24th, 25th, I think it was, the first Congress in 1789 did 2 things. They approved the First Amendment, and they called on the President Washington, to declare a national day of prayer and thanksgiving to God. Mm-hmm. Now, they would not have approved the First Amendment at the same time they did something contrary to the First Amendment.
Right.
And so you had the thing that, the system that worked along so that the United States people, through their government, affirm the existence of God, but at the same time there's neutrality among sects. Mm-hmm. All right? And then what happened in 1962 and 1963 was that the Supreme Court changed that.
Right.
So that the neutrality between, among sects that was required of government, and the First Amendment was now applied against the states. So the neutrality required of federal and state governments was no longer neutrality among Baptist, Congregational, Presbyterian, Catholic, whatever, but neutrality between theism and non-theism.
Exactly, right.
All right? This is crucial. This is in 1962 and 3.
Yeah, it's because it sets it sort of tills the ground for what's about to happen.
Yes, exactly right.
Let's take a break and come back to that.
Yeah.
Hard wrap here, that's it. The legal environment is being shaped for this as well, and that's a very important point. We'll be right back right after this. Stay with us, please. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Right Reason with Dr. Charlie Rice. Right. We are talking about Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae, and right now we're picking up our conversation from the first part of the show where the legal ground was prepared. The societal craziness was already ready. Now the legal ground's being prepared, so pick up the conversation there.
Sure. We were talking about the fact that the Supreme Court had changed the meaning of the First Amendment in 1962 and 63 to require state and federal governments to maintain neutrality not only among religious sects, but between theism and non-theism. In an earlier case in 1961, Torcaso against Watkins, Roy Torcaso applied to become a notary public in Maryland, right? And Maryland had a provision saying that to be a public official, you had to say you believed in God, right? Now you could talked about that in terms of the free exercise of religion and say that that's contrary to that and so on. What the Supreme Court did in Torcaso was that they struck it down. They said because it puts Maryland on the side of one kind of religion, religions that believe in God. And then in a footnote, they said, among religions in this country that do not acknowledge a belief in God are Buddhism, Taoism, ethical culture, and secular humanism.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Supreme Court did in the school prayer cases in 1962 and 63 was adopt that theory as the basic meaning of the Establishment Clause,
Mm-hmm.
so that the state must be neutral on the existence of God. Well, what that results in is an established agnosticism.
Sure.
Because
And gives it equal footing as religion.
right, because it's unconstitutional for a public official to say that, in theory, to say that God exists, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unconstitutional for him to say that God doesn't exist. He's
Right.
dead. He died last Tuesday, or whatever.
Right.
What the public official has to say is, in essence, I, on behalf of the state, cannot know.
Mm-hmm.
So that the posture of the state, the government, is that God, nobody can know.
Mm-hmm.
The government cannot affirm or deny the existence of God, and it must therefore be advancing a non-judgmental,
Sure.
agnostic position.
Exactly.
And that's crucial. It's very central to this whole thing. Because what it means is that it plays into what we were talking in previous discussions, where if you say that reason can't know
Right.
the existence of God, then any statements about God or objective morality are non-rational,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore excluded from the public discourse.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this development, right? At the time the pill is coming in, it was finally
Yeah, what you
approved.
do is you sort of destabilize the idea of an objective morality in law.
Right, and you exclude from the public discourse any statement of objective morality or of God's law.
Mm-hmm.
Justice Brennan typified this in the second school prayer case. He wrote a long concurring opinion in which he said that this decision does not mean we have to take the words "in God we trust" out of the off the coins, and the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance, he said, for example, are not necessarily unconstitutional. Now get this, because they may merely mean that this nation was believed to have been founded under God. All right? Now watch the, you got to watch the shelf.
That's a shift.
Yeah.
That's a big
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah, because
It's not
if-
saying we believe in a God, it's saying we believe that the founders believed in a God. Or
Exactly.
we know that they believed in a God.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
so that what you're dealing with is a situation where statements, for example, that the Declaration of Independence, in 4 places it recognizes, it affirms the existence of God. Well, these are referred to on the court as ceremonial deism.
yeah.
All right, so that they are not to be taken as fact.
Right.
So you have, before Humanae Vitae comes out,
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, you have this insulation of objective morality
Mm-hmm.
and of God's law from any relevance to public discourse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the public discourse is now being secularized, and it has been totally secularized
Sure.
in the intervening years. So that's a background against which you put Humanae Vitae.
And so those cases are in the early 60s, 61, 62?
61, 62, and 63.
All right. Then you have 1965. Along comes Griswold
Yes.
and the Griswold v. Connecticut.
Right.
The Connecticut laws in the books, the Comstock laws, had said, that it's illegal to,
Well, Connecticut law was really a dumb law,
yeah.
all right? Because what it did was it made the use of contraceptives by married couples a crime, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to ask the question, well, how do you get your evidence?
How do you enforce that law?
How do you get your evidence, all right? And it was a dumb law,
Yeah.
all right? And it had not been enforced, and they finally ginned up a test case. And the Supreme Court found, as Justice Douglas, some would irreverently call him William Zero Douglas, but I would never do that. But
Yeah, it's like Richard Nixon saying he will never speak horribly of his enemies.
yeah, right. But as he put it,
Zero
that,
Douglas.
there is a right of privacy in the penumbras, shadows, formed by emanations from the Bill of Rights, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And that right of privacy was what underlay Roe versus Wade.
Right.
So you
Which
had
comes just 7 years later.
That's
8
correct.
years later.
That's correct. And you had the Supreme Court in Eisenstadt against Beard just a year before Roe,
Mm-hmm.
kind of foreshadowed it, where, as I recall, it was Justice Brennan again who said that the right of privacy, the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
forbids interference with the right to decide to bear or beget a child,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of a foreshadowing of Roe.
Sure.
So the 60s were a decisive period.
Yeah, they really were. Everything took a hard left.
Right. But the legalization or the denunciation of humani vitae came against the background of a secularization of the American legal system, and that accelerated the rejection of it by so much of the Christian and Judeo-Christian.
Yeah, I think it's also important to realize that while there are certainly instances of these of laws sort of coming out of the blue, or interpretations of laws and rulings coming out of the blue, while it certainly looks like that, and oftentimes the rulings do go against the majority of what the majority feel or sense or want to believe. Nonetheless, the environment from which these laws come, or these rulings come, is already in existence. There's already, in the legal world, there's already a preparation and acceptance of these kind of overreachings of the Constitution and things like that, so that now, once that atmosphere is set, well, then things can come from. When a guy gets down on his knee and says, "Baby, will you marry me?" Well, that's just sort of the natural thing that comes out of the environment that's already existing. He doesn't just wake up one day, not know her, and walk up to her on a bus and say, "Hey, will you marry me?" They've got a whole relationship going on before that. So it's the same thing here. When you get hey, you have a right to kill a child in the womb. Well, that doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of all of this preparation stuff that's happened beforehand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But the law is also an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the law, Roe versus Wade. The basic principle, basic holding in Roe versus Wade was that the 14th Amendment applies only postnatally, so that the unborn child is not a person. You have your constitutional rights not because you're a human being.
Right.
You have them because you're, in law, a person.
Right.
Right?
And that's the flip.
Right. And the question is, what in any sane legal system, all human beings are entitled to be treated as persons.
Sure.
You can forfeit that by committing a crime or whatever, but
how could you be a human being without being a person?
Right. I mean, that's if personhood is the condition, as it is in our system, for constitutional rights, all human beings are entitled to be treated as persons.
Right.
See? But the Supreme Court in Roe said, we don't have to decide whether the unborn child, they called him the fetus, is a human being. We don't have to decide when human life begins. What we do hold is that that's not a person.
Right.
And
Because they've set up an artificial definition of what person is. They made person a subcategory of human being. So you got all human beings, some of whom are persons.
Exactly.
If you're a person, you have these rights, but all these other human beings that aren't persons don't.
Exactly. And what they said was, in essence, whether or not this is a human being, he's not a person.
Right.
All right. Now, that has implications far-reaching.
Sure it does. If that's the case, what's wrong with what Hitler did to the Jews?
It's exactly the same principle. Because in the Nuremberg laws of 1935,
They excluded out
they excluded them from citizenship, which was the criterion there, and essentially defined them out of the community, because that's what's happening in legalized abortion. And you get the same approach when you're talking about death panels and Obamacare and all the rest of that, because they're in there, potentially, all right? And you have the question, well, which human beings of advanced age are we going to treat? And which ones are not entitled to be treated? And that is a very dangerous concept. That's what Paul VI was talking about when he said a very dangerous power would be given to government.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely, because what does government get to do? Government gets to take a look at the entire, what would we say sort of generically, the human family, the beings who share the same DNA, and say that these beings with that DNA don't count.
Right.
And these beings do.
Yeah.
And that becomes a very, as you said, that's it. That's what Hitler did. That's what you see in the Obamacare thing. It's what you see in Planned Parenthood, the national abortion. That's these human beings over here don't count. And why? Ultimately, because we say they don't count.
Exactly. Now, do we have enough time? Are we running out of time?
Well, yeah, we are. We're always running out of time, Doctor.
Okay.
Take your point. I'm sure we'll build on it in another show. Make your point, what you're going to make there.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was to just go through the consequences of accepting the legitimacy of contraception.
Go ahead.
Abortion, euthanasia, the homosexual thing, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, of course they do. The second you say that sex becomes decoupled from what its natural end is, and becomes something merely for pleasure, why can't you have sex with a dog? Why can't you have sex with 43 people at the same time? Why can't you, have sex with whoever you want? If that's the criteria, well, then there is no criteria, and you can say whatever you want, and that is it.
Yeah.
So and it's crafty. It's sort of very craftily put together, as you can see, sort of the unfolding of all of this.
But it has been, in my opinion, the cause of so many of these very negative phenomena. So we're about to terminate this section, right?
I think another thing worth noting very quickly is not only does contraception allow all this kind of variety, but what are the consequences of contraception? You've got fatherless children, tons of young men running around with no fathers, who don't. Where are they going to turn? Where are they going to turn to learn to be men? You've got shattered families. We've had to invent a whole new vocabulary because of this. Now we have blended families because there's so many divorced and remarried couples and their kids from here and kids from there, and it's been the thing. It's amazing that the smallest little thing you could think of, a pill, has destroyed the society. You juxtapose those two things. The smallest possible thing has caused the largest possible damage.
Oh yeah. I think it'd be worth doing that, just going through and picking these issues, looking at them one at a time. Take abortion, for example. The contraceptive society needs abortion as a backup.
Yeah, Justice, not Brennan.
Marshall.
Marshall said that.
Yeah, it needs abortion as a backup.
Yeah.
And if you claim for yourself the right to decide when life will begin, you're going to claim the right to decide when it ends.
Sure.
Same thing applies to euthanasia. And the contraceptive ethic has resulted in a pressure for death panels, euthanasia, and so on, because of the fact you have so many fewer wage earners supporting the old people.
Yeah, there's 60 million plus people missing
Right.
from the economy right now. If you date back to 1973, when abortion becomes legal across the nation, you start counting from there. 60 million people have not been born into the economy. And that's just 40 years, not quite, from when we're taping this, 40 years. Every one of these people would be adding to, paying taxes, working, having money spent on them, even if they were children. Still got to pay diapers and all kinds of things for them. And where's that money? It's interesting. We did a show, with the cost of abortion in, 2-3 years ago.
Right.
And it was interesting that we calculated the whole thing out, that the drain on the economy with, at that point, 56 million missing consumers was equal, almost identical to the national debt.
Right.
$13 trillion is what these 56 million people would have contributed to the economy. And we've we've dug our own grave and we're falling in it.
But it's not only that; it's that many of these people would have by now become parents themselves.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's the ghost numbers.
Right. But it's not just an American problem.
Oh, no.
Pat Buchanan, in his new book, Suicide of a Superpower, reviews the demographic realities of Europe and the United States and Japan. I mean, Japan's
actually going down in population.
And this is a worldwide problem.
Yeah, absolutely is.
So you have a lot of things. And everybody gets concerned about promiscuity and kids and all that, but the only reason why sex is reserved for marriage is because sex has something to do with babies.
Absolutely.
And new taxpayers. Right? But if you say if it's entirely the decision of man and woman whether sex will be reserved, will have anything to do with babies, then why should it be reserved for marriage?
Yeah, exactly.
Or why should marriage be permanent? And why not shack up? Why not cohabit and so on?
Exactly.
So the societal impact of that is enormous. I mean, so many things, and the gay rights deal in particular.
Everything. Yeah, that's the next contraceptive issue coming down the pike. It's already here, but
yeah, we should probably go into that in some detail.
Well, we're going to do it on another show because I'm about to get killed.
Yeah, okay, all right. But let's do that. Let's, because I think what you have to do is examine not just the homosexual thing, the same-sex marriage, but also the pornography.
Sure,
business,
these are all
in vitro fertilization,
bastard stepchildren of contraception.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they are. All right, before I get killed. Thanks very much, Doctor.
Okay.
Wrapping up, goodbye. See you next time on Right Reason.